Hello guys, welcome to Hook with Anime. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Ghost? Disclaimer. I do not own Bleach. Looking out over the city with the last rays of the dying sun, the petite Shinigami examines this new world. It is the first night of her first solo mission. It's also her first mission to the human world, and being trusted to carry out her duty alone brings her a sense of accomplishment. She is glad she has the night shift. Her daytime partner refused to go out with her on her first patrol. As she looks down at all the humans scurrying about their lives completely oblivious to her presence, she thinks back to the 150 years it took her to get this assignment. In Soul Society, 150 years is not very long at all, since your soul can live on for eternity unless it is destroyed. She thinks about how these humans go about their little lives thinking that there is nothing beyond, so they put everything they have into making their mark on this world in the 80 or so years they get to live. If they only knew what waited for them in the afterlife. She suddenly snaps out her thoughts when she feels a hollow not far away moving slow. She hurries towards it, jumping from rooftop to rooftop until she hears it holler. "Here we go. Stay calm. This is what you came here to do," she thinks to herself. It's not the first time you have fought a hollow, but it is the first time you have done it alone, so don't screw up, stay focused. She comes to a little park and sees a spider-like hollow chasing after a young boy's spirit. She quickly draws her Zanpakuto and jumps in front of the hollow. The hollow immediately changes targets and goes for the Shinigami. It charges at her with its mouth open, but she easily evades and retaliates with a slash that removes 2 legs off the left side of the spider-like body. The hollow bellows in rage and steps back, preparing its next attack. She doesn't give him a chance and quickly goes airborne, bringing down her Zanpakuto. The creature's mask is sliced in half and then its body begins to disintegrate. The girl turns to the young soul and, taking a knee, places the hilt of her weapon to his forehead. "Don't worry, you will find peace and happiness in the next life," she says stoically. Showing no emotion, she just watches as the soul is consumed in light and disappears. She stands and lets out a sigh as sheathes her weapon. She closes her eyes to try to calm herself when she feels something strange. Her eyes immediately snap back open and she turns. Her Zanpakuto is back in her hands while she looks for that Reitsu she just felt. She felt it coming from directly behind her and it was close. Way to close for comfort. But as she looks around she sees nothing and can no longer sense the Reitsu. She looks closer and stays on guard for a little while longer before chalking it up to too much excitement and continues her patrol. Randomly throughout the entire night she feels as though someone is watching her and it gives her the chills and completely stresses her out. A little before dawn the feeling dissipates and she heads back to wake up her partner for her shift. Captain, I can do that. No, Sentaro, I'm taking care of him. I'm his favorite." Rukia watches Kion sleep for a moment, wondering why she is arguing with Sentaro in her sleep. It's not like she doesn't do it enough when she is awake. Kion, Rukia says softly. Seeing no response she tries another approach. "Wake up, Kyone," she yells, giving the girl a kick in her rump. "Ow. What was that for, Rukia?" the newly awakened girl asks while sitting up and rubbing her now bruised butt. "You wouldn't wake up, so I tried to give you a little incentive," Rukia says, sticking her tongue out at her. "It's your shift. I only had 1 hollow last night." She thinks about asking her about the strange Reitsu she felt, but decided it's just her imagination, and not wanting to look weak in front of the third seat she decides to keep her mouth shut. She watches as the other girl gets out of bed, then she heads back out into living area of Urahara's shop. She sits waiting for everyone else to awaken. She doesn't have to wait long until Urahara comes in, trailed by Uru and a black cat. "Oh, good morning, Ms. Kuchiki. How was patrol last night?" Urahara asks as he takes a seat opposite Rukia. "Did anything interesting happen last night?" he asks with a gleam in his eye. "No, the patrol was fine. I only had to engage 1 hollow. It was a nasty one, looked like a spider and was chasing after a young boy," she replies. "Where was this at?" he asks, looking extremely interested. "A park not more than 2 miles from here," she says, trying to hide her confusion at his overly interested queries. She knows that Urahara was once a captain in the 12th division. Why is he so interested in such a low-level hollow? She wonders. She was about to ask just that when Kion walks in and sits as Uru comes from the opposite direction bringing food. Rukia and Kion both look at it hungrily. "Have you heard of the ghost of Karakura town?" Urahara asks the ladies. They both look at him in confusion. I guess not. Allow me to share the story with you. About 20 years ago, the Shinigami that were posted here began to notice a drastic decrease in the number of hollows that show up. They used to see an average of 20 to 30 a day, but that dropped to less than 20 in one night. That's not to say that more wouldn't be detected. The Shinigami would be informed of a hollow or feel one, but by the time they got to the area there was nothing. About 2 weeks, the events continued, so they called for a complete overhaul of the detection system in Soul Society. I think I remember that. They had all of Sarate on alert for about a week while diagnostics were run. They didn't find anything wrong with the equipment, Kion says. You are absolutely right, but even after the system checks, it still continued to happen. Then one day a very powerful hollow appeared. It injured the day shift bad enough to render him unconscious, and luckily the night shift was awake. He ran to the area and attacked the hollow. He was injured as well, claiming that he felt a power Reitsu coming up behind him that was the source of his distraction. Before losing consciousness, he claims to have seen another Shinigami defeat the hollow. When he finally awoke, not only was the hollow gone, but he and his partner had been healed and they had been moved into the shade of a nearby tree. Since then, the patrolling Shinigami often have reported that they have felt like they are being watched by something with Reitsu, but when they turn to face it, it has already gone. Many have tried to use Kido on it when they felt it, but no one has gotten close. He looks at the two girls who are staring at him in disbelief while silently urging him to continue. Then about 3 years ago, even more hollows were disappearing. It went down from 20 to merely 2 or 3, rarely more than that. And every now and then a Shinigami is rescued by a man in black robes, supposedly looking very similar to your Shinigami robes. The last one was about 2 years ago. The man was described to be tall, muscular, have a rather large Zanpakuto, and there was one other very distinguishing feature. I can't remember, he says, shrugging his shoulders. Did Soul Society try to do anything about this ghost? I mean, ghosts don't exist. They are just souls who haven't passed. Rukia asks, looking down while thinking about the strange feeling she had last night. Ghosts don't exist, but if they did, the man would be as close to one as they come. No one knows who he is, but he is almost always around even when you can't see or feel him. I have no doubt that the ghost is out there watching. Probably watching us right now, wondering why Kion isn't out on patrol yet. He glares at Kion as she stands, sighs and heads outside. Maybe we shouldn't refer to him as a ghost, but maybe a guardian. I know of at least 13 Shinigami that have been saved, and the hollow activity has decreased so much that we can bring younger Shinigami here for missions to help them gather much needed experience. Soul Society noticed that the ghost would help Shinigami in trouble, so they tried to fake a Shinigami getting hurt, but apparently he saw through it and wasn't seen or felt. They tried many times but to no avail. Urahara replies. Do you believe in this ghost? Rukia asks, looking directly into his eyes. Urahara just looks back into her eyes and with all seriousness, yes. With that, Rukia heads into the room her and Kion share and collapses on the futon. As she closes her eyes, she tries not to think about the possibility of a ghost watching her. She tries to remember what that Reitsu felt like as she drifts off into oblivion. That night Rukia is once again out on patrol, but this time she is continuously trying to remember it so she might be able to pick it up. No hollows have showed up so far, so she has spent the better part of the night looking for it. After 4 hours of sitting there focusing, she decides to take a break and head out onto the sidewalk for a walk. She enjoys watching the few people who are up at the time of night, remembering that this is what Urahara called a weekend, so a lot more people would be out than usual. She looks at the faces of those who walk past her and she studies the different facial expressions and the displayed emotions. She sees a man whose face makes a grimace every time he steps on his right foot. She also looks at a man and woman who are pulled together in a tight embrace, kissing. She continues her walk and is startled when she begins to feel eyes on her. She quickly spins around searching for those eyes, but again comes up with nothing. She feels irritated and begins her walk again, still feeling those eyes upon her. Maybe it's not this ghost, she thinks, then starts to become furious. My brother better not have sent someone to watch me. She is so deep in her own thoughts that she doesn't notice that her hollow alarm has gone off or that the eyes are no longer upon her. She instead gets yanked out of her thoughts by feeling that Reitsu growing immensely. She stops trying to pinpoint it when she notices her hollow alarm. She quickly pushes the Reitsu out her mind and begins heading to the hollow at top speed. When she arrives at the scene, it's not what she expects. She first notices the amount of Reitsu residue around the area. It's the same Reitsu I was feeling earlier. She looks around the area to see the last of the remains of a giant hollow disintegrate, and a small girl looking to be about 5 is standing about 50 feet from the hollow's remains. Rukia jumps down in front of the girl and puts on her best smile. It surprises her that the girl didn't show any kind of fear at seeing the Shinigami. "Do you know who I am?" Rukia asks the girl. The girl shakes her head and grins. She turns on her heel and begins to skip away until Rukia stops her. "What happened here? Who stopped that hollow?" she asks, trying to keep her voice sweet. "Hollow? Oh, you mean that monster that was chasing me? Someone dressed just like Yo." The girl stops as she puts her hands over her mouth. "I can't tell you. I made a promise not to tell anyone." Rukia rolls her eyes and tries to keep the irritation out of her voice. "Can you tell me what this person looked like?" The girl shakes her head. "No, he told me, I need you to promise not to tell anyone that I was here. Then he gave me this scary scowl, then a smile, so I promised." With that, the girl turned and ran away smiling. Rukia decides she needs to have another talk with Urahara. A month later, Rukia is rather pissed that in the past month, she and Kion combined have only killed about 100 hollows. And Rukia only got 30 of those. It seemed the ghost was more active at night. Every time she got an alert, the thing was destroyed before she got there. One night she decided to see how long it took for the alert to sound indicating a hollow and stop indicating that it had been destroyed. That was the night she felt very stupid. She ended up having to kill 11 hollows in one night. Not once did she feel eyes on her or did she feel the mysterious Reitsu. She had gone to bed that night wondering where the ghost had gone. Maybe he saw I could take care of myself and didn't feel as though I needed to be watched. She immediately felt a little down at the thought that he wouldn't be watching her anymore. She pushed it out of her mind and went to sleep. The following night, though, all those thoughts she had disappeared as she felt the familiar eyes upon her. She almost smiled. She continued on her patrol and would occasionally do a soul burial to a soul that didn't have much left of their soul chain. She felt a few hollows, and each time she would rush to the area only to find a soul looking bewildered and a disintegrating hollow corpse. After about the 5th one that night, she couldn't control herself and screamed at the top of her lungs to the ghost she was sure was watching her, "Can you at least leave one for me?" She left the area and walked solemnly back towards Urahara's shop. She felt another hollow and quickly ran to it, bound and determined to get there before the ghost. She thought she did until she felt the familiar Reitsu not far away. She decided to hide her own Reitsu and see if she could draw him out. After a few minutes he just stayed hidden, so she decided to finish off the hollow herself before it devoured the soul it was chasing. She quickly did a soul burial upon the terrified soul, then stood and yelled again. "Were you just going to stand around and watch that soul get eaten?" She huffed as she waited for an answer. When none came, she resumed her walk toward Urahara's, fuming, her anger evident on her face. She was surprised when she turned a corner and saw writing on the sidewalk. Rukia froze as she read the words. "You asked me to leave you one. If you couldn't have defeated that hollow, I would have, Shinigami." Rukia ran straight to Urahara's, not stopping for anything. She burst through the door and quickly looks for the blonde-haired nut. She finds him asleep and she doesn't even hesitate to kick him. "Get up, I have to talk to you. He communicated with me. Can you believe it?" Rukia begins as Urahara is sitting up. "What do you mean he communicated with you? Wait, who is he?" he asks. "The ghost, who else?" Rukia states excitedly. "Did he talk to you? What does he look like?" "Wait, start from the beginning and tell me everything," Urahara says. Rukia immediately begins to recount all the events leading up until now. She is so engrossed into her story that she doesn't even realize the black cat stealthily walking toward the door. Before it leaves, it gives one last glance toward Urahara, where it receives a slight nod and the cat is gone. When Rukia finishes her story, she looks to Urahara, who seems to be deep in thought. He notices her looking at him, so he immediately puts on a smile. "That is truly amazing, Rukia. It appears to be obvious that he is watching out for you. You should feel flattered. The ghost has never communicated to anyone before." Urahara gives her a wink. "Maybe he is taken with you. You are a beautiful, young and rather petite Shinigami. Yep, I would definitely say he is interested." Rukia gawks at that last statement. She is thinking up something to say when Urahara speaks up. "Anyways," he begins again, Changing the subject, summer will be over in another month. Then you will be probably killing more hollows every night. I don't know why, but the ghost kills more hollows during the summer than any other time of year. It's almost like he gets busy with something else. The black cat enters the house through an open window and appears to be wandering around the house looking for something. She sees the young girl in the kitchen and immediately walks over to her. "Oh hey kitty. Long time no see," the little girl says with a huge smile spreading along her face. "But you know you're not supposed to be in here. If sister gets sick, she isn't going to be happy." With that, the girl picks up the cat and heads towards another part of the house, rubbing her face against the cat's fur. The cat lets out a soft purr. They come to a room that looks like a waiting room in a clinic and sets the cat down. "Dad, you told me to tell you if the black kitty ever comes back." "Okay, thanks Yuzu," a deep voice bellows from the back. "Remember, don't tell Ichigo or Karen. Here kitty kitty kitty." The cat jumps toward the sound and stops to make sure Yuzu is leaving the room. Once Yuzu is gone, she continues her walk to see a man crouched down with his arms open and a stupid smile on his face. "Ah, such a pretty kit," he is cut off by the cat scratching his outstretched hands. "OWW. Why did you do that?" "'Cause I have told you before not to do the whole kitty 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 thing." "Never mind that anyway, we need to talk," the cat says. The man doesn't seem to be surprised that the cat can talk and gets a serious look on his face. What did my idiot son do this time? Chapter 2. The Masked Man Disclaimer. I do not own bleach. A week has gone by since the ghost communicated with Rukia. She has tried to talk to him many times since, but he never responds. Nevertheless, she can still feel him watching her, and he even leaves her more hollows to kill. Although she can feel him watching her as she does. She finds it only slightly irritating that he is always around, but she gets extremely annoyed when he doesn't answer her when she tries to talk to him. After only being allowed to kill 3 hollows that night, her anger gets the better of her. "I want to talk to you face to face," she shouts. She stands there waiting for an answer for what seemed an eternity. Then she yells again, "Coward," followed by her walking down the street. Again she is surprised, and all her anger melts away when she turns a corner and sees words written on the sidewalk again. "I'm sorry midget, but we can't. And I am not a coward." Rukia just stands there and blinks at the response, reading it over and over. When her mind finally realizes that he called her a midget, her anger swells and she yells again. "Don't call me a midget, you pompous ass. And yes, you are a coward for not showing yourself to me." She huffs and walks away. She doesn't even realize that she walked over more words until she hears a noise behind her. She spins on her heels to see what it was, hoping it was the so-called ghost so she could make him into a real one. She then sees the writing on the sidewalk and goes to it. Her anger seethes as she reads the words. "Okay dwarf. Don't worry, you'll meet me face to face one of these days. I don't doubt you will need my help soon. But remember, I won't help unless you ask for it. Oh, and don't tell people we talked." Rukia was slightly taken aback at finding out he knew she talked about him. She couldn't wait to get back to Urahara's that morning to tell him all about it. She even decides to tell Kion once she gets up. Maybe even go on patrol with her for a little bit so she will join her tonight. When her patrol finally finishes, she waits for Kion to wake up with Urahara. She decides to let Kion sleep in a little so as to get on her good side. So now she sits with Urahara regaling him of last night's events. Interesting. It seems our ghost has a bit of an anger issue. Have you gotten the chance to see him while he writes the notes or have learned to trace his reitsu? Urahara asks. No, he seems to be able to hide it pretty damn well when he isn't fighting. But when I get to where he has fought, there is such a powerful residue. He seems to be pretty powerful. The souls he rescues more often than not are silent about him. He makes them promise not to say anything about what happened, and definitely not anything that pertains to him. Do you think it may be a Shinigami that was banished or exiled? Rukia asks. It is possible, except no one knows this reitsu. Of all the Shinigami that have come here, none of them recognized it, although some find it familiar to another reitsu. They can't place either though. Urahara replies. Shortly after, Kion comes in and she begins her tale again, telling Kion everything. Then to her surprise, Kion asks if she can come on patrol with her tonight. "I really want to see if we can find this ghost. I feel him sometimes but not very often. Usually only when I fight, but he seems to follow you around everywhere. I think that if I keep my reitsu hidden, I might be able to sneak around and find him since he won't know that I am with you. I'll even leave after you so we look even less suspicious. Urahara just chuckles, good luck, but don't be disappointed if you don't find anything. I have already told you that he can smell a trap. But I do wish you good luck. I would like to know what the ghost looks like and why he does what he does. That night Rukia is walking through the city feeling the eyes upon her. She has been on patrol for nearly 6 hours and she hasn't felt Kion or the ghost Reitsu once. Due to their careful plan, Kion was going to leave 20 minutes after Rukia and follow her by her Reitsu while looking for the ghost. She was beginning to think Kion didn't come. Where is she? She says. When she turns the corner she gets her answer by way of writing on the sidewalk. Your friend is about a quarter mile behind you. I have to admit she is pretty good about hiding. It took me about 10 minutes before I realized she was following you. With that Rukia turned around and hollers, Kion, the gig is up, come here. Kion steps out of some bushes and walks over to Rukia. Why did you announce that I was there? Now we won't be able to find him, she says. Rukia doesn't say anything, just points to the writing with a glare. Kion walks up to it and blushes as she reads. Wow, I got a compliment from the ghost. I don't see what's so great about that. It's not as though he told you himself. The guy is scared to show his face, he must be fat and ugly. Rukia states angrily. Just as Kion is about to say something they feel 2 hollows on the other side of town. They rush as fast as they can and Kion quickly pulls ahead using her shunpo. Rukia curses herself for not practicing with it more. By the time Rukia arrives, 1 hollow is down deteriorating and another is injured. Kion has a slash across her chest and she is doubled over using her Zanpakuto for support. Rukia quickly enters the fray and with the 2 of them the hollow dies rather quickly. Rukia goes over to Kion to begin using her healing Kido when an ominous Reitsu appears. She watches as the sky seems to rip apart and a giant walks out. The thing is at least 200 feet tall, covered in black with a huge white mask. Manos Grande, Kion gasps and both girls just stare horrified. They don't even realize that the Manos is generating a Sero until it is heading their way. They both react but they are too slow. The Sero lands no more than 10 feet behind them and they are thrown from the blast. Rukia notices she can't move her arm and when she looks she can see a piece of metal buried in her shoulder. She tries to ignore the pain and struggles to go over by Kion, who is now unconscious, bleeding from a wound on her head. Rukia collapses next to her as her own blood loss is making her weak. She looks in the direction of the Manos and realizes it is no longer interested in them but in a man dressed in black with a huge Zanpakuto strapped to his back. He is like nothing she has ever seen before. His Shinigami robes are tight against his muscled body and he is wearing a mask that covers his face and head. He turns to look at Rukia and she immediately finds herself staring into his piercing amber eyes. She almost gasps at their intensity, at their beauty. She finds herself getting lost in their perfection. She has never seen eyes that beautiful. He just looks at her wound then turns to face the Manos. Rukia quickly regains herself and hollers at the masked man. Get out of here, it'll kill you. You don't stand a chance. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine. But remember what I said. I won't help you until you ask. And just so you know, you are much prettier up close. The man says over his shoulders. Rukia was surprised to hear his voice. Very arrogant, near laughing, melodic, and yet commanding. Rukia tries to speak but finds it is taking all her energy just to keep her eyes open. The masked man turns back and sees her situation. Fine, he says, I am only going to give you this one freebie. The man says before using shunpo to get closer to the Manos. He is fast. The fastest I have ever seen, faster than my brother even. Rukia says to herself as she watches him reappear directly in front of the Manos. She is wide-eyed at the way he just stands there and reaches back for his Zanpakuto. She watches as the white cloth removes itself from encasing the massive weapon as the man lifts it with one hand. The size of one blade reflects the power of one's Reitsu. She remembers, then she watches on as the masked man releases his hold on his Reitsu and it begins to spill from his body. He is overflowing with it. He must be at nearly a captain's level. She stops thinking as she watches the man lift his sword and bring it down shouting the words, Getsuga Tensho. Rukia watches as a huge amount of black Reitsu is shot forth from the blade, slicing into the Manos, cutting it in half. As the Manos disappears she sees the masked man in front of her again, kneeling down examining her wound. She looks into his face searching for his eyes. When she finds them, she stares into them, as if trying to see into his soul. She begins to feel herself lose consciousness and closes her eyes. As she begins to drift away, she hears him say, "I told you that we would be meeting face to face and that you would be needing my help." There was a slight pause, then he said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you and your friend, Midget." And with that she lets go and drifts off. Rukia wakes with a gasp. She sits up and her hand immediately goes to her shoulder and finds it bandaged. She can move her arm, but it hurts like hell. She quickly surveys the room, realizing that it is the room she and Kion share. Kyone. She shouts in her head, looking around more intensely. She sees Kion lying next to her, also bandaged. Kion has bandages covering her chest and head. Rukia holds her breath as she listens for Kaiwan's. Kion is breathing normal, just as she would if she was asleep. Rukia lets out her held breath, then winces as the pain in her shoulder reminds her that she had been careless. "Oh, you're awake. How do you feel?" Urahara asks from the open doorway. "It hurts, a lot. How did we get here?" she asks. "I brought you here." Urahara lied. "I felt the ominous reitsu of Amanos Grande and rushed over to see if you needed any help. When I got there, you two were unconscious and bandaged, so I decided to bring you both back here to rest." "How long was I out?" Rukia asks, accepting his explanation. 3 days if you count the night I found you," Urahara replies.
3 days? What about all the hollows? I have to. Urahara cuts her off with his raised hand. "It seems our ghost has been busy. I have felt him fighting all over town. The poor guy doesn't seem to be getting any rest. I bet he is waiting on you to get back to work. He has been purifying all the hollows that have showed up since you two went down."
"He isn't a ghost," Rukia says, remembering his form and those gorgeous amber eyes and his commanding voice. "He was definitely dressed in Shinigami robes, and his Zanpakuto is a massive blade that is completely black. It has no guard and would stay on his back by being held there with a lot of white cloth. When he touched it, the cloth would just melt away, and he wore a black mask that covered his face and head." She sighs, again thinking about those intriguing eyes. "He has the most alluring amber eyes." Urahara smiles at that. "Did he say anything to you?" "He told me, I'll give you one freebie, but next time you have to ask," before he killed the Manos. "Then he said I was much prettier up close." Rukia responds, looking down, trying to hide her blush. "Wow, a Manos Grande. He killed it in one strike. He definitely is more powerful than I thought. What an interesting turn of events. Looks like I was right, he seems to be interested in you." Just then Kion wakes with a groan. "What happened? How are we alive? Did you kill that Manos, Rukia?" "No, the ghost did," she states flatly. Kaiwan's mood seems to brighten almost immediately. "Did you see him? What does he look like? He must be powerful. Did he say anything?" Rukia groans and tells Kion everything. When she is finished, she looks at Kion, who is looking down with a pout. "What?" she asks Kion. "He said you're pretty but didn't say anything about me, when I am definitely prettier than you," Kion says. Rukia scoffs but decides not to start an argument. "Alright, ladies, that's enough. You have to hurry up and heal up so you can get back to work. I'll have Soul Society send a temporary replacement to take care of the hollows and someone Froswad 4 to care for you until you are rested." "Lieutenant Abari," a man says behind a desk. Renji hurries into the room to present himself in front of his captain. "Yes, Captain. You are going to the human world. Apparently my sister and third seat Kion were injured in a battle with a Manos Grande," Captain Kuchiki says. "What?" Renji says. "Is Rukia alright?" Captain Kuchiki continues, ignoring his outburst. "I want you to take over their duties until they are healed and ready to continue. Give me a report as soon as you arrive." Dismissed. "Yes, Captain," Renji says as he exits the building, head to the gate that will take him to the human world. "I hope she is alright. I don't know what I would do if she isn't. Why did she fight a Manos Grande without calling for backup? Did she defeat it? I have a lot of questions." As Renji exited the portal, he looks around the human world and immediately notices a powerful reitsu near a hollow on the other side of town, and just as he was about to head towards it, it disappears along with that of the hollow. He is dumbfounded at the sheer volume of reitsu. That is a captain's level. There aren't any captains here, and I don't recognize it either. I know all of the captains by heart, and that is not one of them. I will have to ask Rukia about that as well. With that, Renji focuses on Rukia's Reitsu and finds her to the east. He rushes there using his shunpo and arrives at Urahara's shop. He enters without knocking and is immediately met with a fist. He falls back onto the ground holding his nose. What was that for? He asks angrily. A big man with massive muscles and dreads stands over him. You never enter someone's home without knocking first. Where are your manners? Right, sorry. Where is Rukia? He asks, feeling a little stupid for neglecting common courtesies. She is asleep at the moment. She won't be up for a while. Who are you? A blond man asks as he steps from behind the tall monster. The man is wearing a rather unique kimono and clogs. His hat has stripes matching his unique kimono. The man carries a cane but obviously doesn't need one. I am Renji Abari, lieutenant of the 6th Division, come here to temporarily replace Rukia Kuchiki and 3rd Seat Kion while they heal. Renji says, straightening himself as he gets off the ground. Ah, the replacement I requested. I didn't ask for them to send a lieutenant though. Oh well, I am Urahara Kazuki, call me Urahara, he says with a bow, and this big strapping fellow is my good friend Tessai. Who nods. I suggest you don't get on his bad side. Urahara says with a smile. Well, there will be plenty of time to talk once the ladies wake up. Go ahead and get to work, come back here in a few hours. Don't worry, I'll let them know that you stopped by. Renji glares before speaking. I want to see Rukia. Oh, don't worry, you will, but I won't let you wake her. You will see her tonight. Ta-ta. Urahara says with a dismissive wave. He turns around and walks back into the house while Tessai closes the door. Renji is dumbfounded. Was I just dismissed? I am a lieutenant. He should show some proper respect. Damn. Why do I have to wait to see her? With that, Renji turns around to search the city for hollows. Throughout the day, he randomly feels eyes on him for a minute or two, then they vanish. Sometimes he feels the strong Reitsu on the other side of town, but by the time he gets there, it's gone. He senses many hollows, but when he arrives they are already disintegrating.
He tried asking many of the souls what had happened, but they just stood there shaking their heads saying they didn't know.
So he sent them to Soul Society without letting them know anything. He had to chase an old man for a few blocks before he caught up to him. He was angry and irritated by the time he returned to Urahara's. He had felt over 30 hollows but only got the chance to kill 12. The others were taken care of before he arrived. Needless to say, he was beyond irritated and was not looking forward to spending time with that Urahara fellow. He walked up to Urahara's door and was just about to open it when he remembered the huge fist that had pummeled him this morning. He steps back and knocks. Immediately the door opens and Renji sees Tessa's smiling face. Looks like you remembered some of your manners. Yeah, sorry about this morning. Is Rukia awake? Renji resents. Yes, she is. In fact, Hanataro from the 4th Division just finished healing her. You may come in and see her now. Renji smiles and follows Tessai into the building. Urahara had just finished telling the girls to not say anything about the ghost to Renji when he suddenly appeared in the doorway. Rukia, he shouted as he ran over to her and knelt before her. Are you okay? What happened? Why did you fight a Manos Grande? You should have called for reinforcements. Renji, it good to see you. I am fine. See, no wounds. Hanataro healed the little injuries I had. As for the Manos Grande, she looks at Urahara, who clears his throat. I killed it, Urahara says as it was as simple as blowing his nose. Renji turns on Urahara with an angry glare. Why weren't there to prevent them from getting injured? That's your job, right? No, I'm afraid you're mistaken as to what my job here is. I am here to help their two beautiful ladies, OWW. Everyone looks down into Urahara's lap to see a black cat with its teeth sunk into his hand. Clearing his throat and removing his hand from the cat's mouth, he continues, as I was saying, my job is to give Shinigami a glimpse of what it is to live in the human world. To broaden their horizons, you might say. I am not supposed to get involved in any battles, but I couldn't let these two lovely The cat in his lap begins to growl. I mean, Shinigami get killed. They bring such happiness into this household. Urahara finishes with a smile. Both girls blush and smile at one another. Well, Renji, how long do you intend to stay? Rukia asks, changing the subject. I am supposed to stay until you are able to return to your duties, he replies. I am able to return to my duties tonight. I am fully healed and refreshed. I don't like being cooped up in the house too much, Rukia says. And I will return to duty tomorrow. So you can head back whenever you are ready. I am sure you have a lot of lieutenant stuff to take care of. Kion interjects before Renji can use her as an excuse. Renji is a little irritated that he is not wanted, but he decides to take it in stride. I would like to participate in your patrol with you tonight, Rukia, then leave in the morning. Your brother told me to give a full report upon my return, and I would like to tell him about how your abilities have grown. Rukia lets out an inaudible groan, then looks to Urahara, who gives her a slight nod. Okay, well, we leave as soon as night falls, so we have another 2 hours or so, Rukia says. Alright, in that case I am going to get some rest before we head out. With that he walks outside. Rukia really didn't want him to come tonight. She wanted to be alone, so maybe, just maybe, the ghost would appear and talk to her. She didn't think that he would come around if another powerful Shinigami was nearby, especially with the way Renji is about not letting her out of his sight. It was going to be a long night. Chapter 3, Stop. Disclaimer. I do not own Bleach. Rukia was right about Renji not letting her out of his sight. He never went more than 10 feet from her and he was constantly talking. Whether it was about Soul Society or about how he finally got his promotion to lieutenant that he has deserved for quite a while now. Rukia just spaced out, constantly say NG, or, really, or, you're right. When they had been out for about an hour, she felt the familiar eyes upon her. She couldn't help but smile. Flashes of the masked man's eyes went through her head and she found herself imagining what his body looked like under that tight Shinigami uniform and what his face looked like under that mask. She thought she could feel those eyes undressing her, and she blushed. Renji noticed the slight pink hue on her cheeks and the smile on her face. Thinking it was for him, he stepped closer to her, smiling all the while. When they felt a hollow nearby, Renji grabbed her hand and ran towards it, immediately bringing Rukia out of her little daydream. Once she notices what is going on, she yells at Renji. Renji, let go, I can walk, you know. Renji stops and looks at her, then releases her hand. Sorry. We have to hurry. I want to get this one before it disappears. I guess you have had a lot of them get away from you. What do they do, just go back to Hueco Mundo? Rukia stammers, I don't know. Renji takes that and turns towards where the hollow is. He feels that Reitsu he has felt all day and is instantly unnerved. The Reitsu is still small, but it is definitely close. Really close. He looks around trying to see it but sees nothing. He looks at Rukia, who has her Zanpakuto at the ready. She can feel the ghost is close, but she doesn't think he will interfere with this fight. Renji looks at her and says, don't worry, I'll protect you, Rukia. Just stay close to me. Rukia quickly pushes Renji to the side, stating angrily, I don't need your protection, I can handle myself. Renji wants to turn to yell at her when he hears the hollow holler. He looks in the direction of the noise and sees the huge hollow rushing towards them. Before he can pull his Zanpakuto all the way out of its scabbard, Rukia rushes ahead of him and strikes, taking off one of its arms. The hollow bellows and falls, taking part of a house with it. Rukia doesn't let up. Dance Soda no Shirayuki. Her Zanpakuto glows a brilliance white. She can almost feel the hidden masked man smirk. First dance, White Moon. Renji watches as a white circle appears on the ground around the struggling hollow, which is suddenly encased in ice. Renji has never seen her use this ability. Of course, he has never seen her in battle before and is quite impressed. He watches as the ice shatters, taking the hollow with it. He looks to Rukia as she puts her Zanpakuto back in its scabbard. See, told you I don't need your protection. Before he has a chance to respond, Rukia is already walking off, her anger still evident in her voice. Renji gathers himself and decides to take to the rooftops until Rukia calms down. He didn't mean to piss her off, he just wanted to keep her safe. But she is right, she doesn't need his protection, she can handle herself. Rukia feels Renji about a quarter mile to her right, jumping from rooftop to rooftop. How dare he say that I needed protection? I don't need his protection, and I definitely don't need him here, she says to herself as she glares at the ground. She keeps walking like this for a couple blocks, then she notices some white writing on the sidewalk. It's a lot smaller than usual. She assumes that is so Renji won't see it. She bends down to read it, knowing that Renji is far enough away not to notice. That was amazing. I have never seen anything like it. I am glad you are feeling better. You'll see me again the next time you are on patrol alone. With that, all her anger left her and was replaced by giddiness. Am I excited about seeing this guy? Will he show me his face? Rukia thinks to herself as she continues walking. She can feel those amber eyes on her and her smile broadens. She tries to hide her smile with her hands when she feels Renji coming towards her. She puts on a scowl before she turns to him. Renji is immediately taken aback by the look Rukia is giving him. He knows he pissed her off, but he felt her reitsu change, so he thought she wasn't as pissed. He decided not to approach her just yet. He is trying to think of a way to convince her to come back to Soul Society with him and give this mission to someone else. After a while of walking behind her, he decides to step up to walk beside her. He purposefully steps close to her, letting his hand hit hers as they walk. Rukia steps away, putting a foot of air between them. Renji suddenly feels down about how his one-time best friend doesn't want to be so close to him anymore. Rukia notices Renji step up to walk beside her, and when she feels his hand touch hers, she steps to the side, imagining an invisible barrier between them. Suddenly she stops, she feeling those perfect eyes on her anymore. She feels a loss that she can't explain. Her happy mood suddenly plummets and is replaced by a slight bit of loneliness. Renji notices that Rukia stopped, and he stopped with her. He looks at her face and sees a sad expression that she is trying to cover up with a scowl. He decides that this is the best time to ask. Rukia, will you come back to Soul Society with me? I will assign a new Shinigami to this area so you can come back. He looks at her but sees no immediate response. Rukia seems to be caught up in her thoughts. Come on, you can't possibly like it here. Rukia snaps out of her thoughts, and looks at Renji, who has a pleading look on his face. She has no idea what he had said, since she was just so engrossed in her own thoughts. What? She asks. I want you to come back to Soul Society with me, Renji says. No, I can't abandon my mission. She stutters, looking for any reason other than the masked man to stay. Don't worry about that, I will have someone else assigned immediately, he says in a calm voice. No, this is my mission. I still have 5 months left, so I will complete my mission. Go home, Renji. This is my responsibility, she mildly shouts. But, she cuts him off, no buts, I will not leave until I am done. Now if you will so kindly move, I have a patrol to finish. With that she walks around him and continues on her way. She didn't feel those eyes on her for the rest of the night, and she also had to fight several more times. It wasn't normal. She was constantly wondering where he had gone off to. Urahara had said that he had been stopping the hollows for the past 3 days all by himself. He must be tired and has probably gone off to get some sleep. That guy must have some amazing stamina. She had only fought 6 tonight and was pretty tired. She couldn't help but wonder if he had gotten injured, and if he did, she pushed that thought out of her mind. She was glad that Renji was quiet for the rest of the patrol. He didn't say anything until they were back at Urahara's with the first of rays of the morning sun cutting through the dark skies. Rukia, Renji said, are you sure that you won't reconsider and come back with me? You don't need this kind of mission. You are better than this. I want this mission, and I won't quit. This mission was given to me by my captain himself. I won't change my mind, she states. Renji let out an exasperated sigh. Okay, if this is what you want. I have to go and give my report to Captain Kuchiki. I guess I will see you around. He takes out his Zanpakuto and opens the gateway. He takes one last pleading look at Rukia. When he sees her stoic look, he shakes his head and walks through the gate. Rukia is sad to see him go, but he has no right to try and make her leave her mission, her duty, her masked hero. Her masked hero. Thinking about that put a smile on her face, and she starts to get excited. She quickly runs into the house, hoping that Urahara is awake, and if he wasn't, she was going to kick him. She decided not to tell Kion since she might follow her and then he might not appear. Rukia wakes fully excited about tonight. She would get to see the masked man again. At the very least she wanted a name, so she didn't have to keep calling him the masked man. She could hardly contain her excitement. She rushes out into the living area and finds Urahara sitting at the table drinking tea. Next to his cup is a curious-looking bracelet. She sits down in front of him as he pours her some tea. You seem excited about something, Urahara says as he hands her the cup. Rukia just grins. Oh yeah, that's right, you get to see the ghost tonight, don't you? Well, it should be a good experience. Make sure you ask him all the questions you have bottled up. You may not get another chance. Rukia nods, keeping her eyes on the bracelet. What is that? This old thing, he says, holding it up for her to get a better look. Why, it is one of my oldest inventions. It allows you to completely seal off your reitsu so no one can detect you. You can still your abilities too. It's kind of like a invisibility charm against Reitsu sensors. I figured you might have a use for it one of these nights. Why didn't you give it to Kion when we were looking for the ghost? She asks confused.
I had forgotten all about it. Tessai found it while he was cleaning out a storeroom this morning. Here, he says, tossing it to her. Don't use until you are sure you have a good enough reason. Don't worry, I won't use it unless I absolutely have to, she says, slipping it into the pocket in her robes. Urahara smiles and says, that a girl? No, go ahead and run along, you don't want to keep Mr. Ghost waiting. Masked man, she states. Huh? Urahara asks with a confused look on his face. He isn't the ghost anymore, call him the masked man. He isn't a ghost, she says as she gets up from the table. Urahara chuckles. Okay, well, we don't want to keep your masked man waiting. I like the sound of that. My masked man, she thinks as she steps out and looks to the darkening sky. Kyon walks up to her from the street and stands next to her with a pout. What's wrong, Kyon? Rukia asks worriedly. He didn't show up once. Not once. I was fighting all day. Nearly 20 hollows. I didn't feel him near me at all. I didn't even feel his eyes on me, she says, still pouting. Inside, Rukia was jumping for joy, but outside she just said, don't worry, Kyon, he was probably just tired. I mean, he did fight non-stop for 3 days so we could rest and recover. So he was probably just sleeping. She sighs and says, I only felt him for just a little bit last night, then he left and I didn't feel him for the rest of the night. Rukia stepped out into the coming darkness and within 20 minutes she could feel his piercing eyes on her. Ichigo walked soundlessly in the grove to the right of the beautiful Shinigami. She wasn't like anything he had seen before. He knew he was supposed to stay away from her, but he just couldn't. When his dad had found out that he had left her a message, he had tackled him and tried to beat it out of him. Of course he won with his dad unconscious on the floor, but that didn't stop his dad from embarrassing him every chance he got in front of his 2 younger sisters. Karen had even taken up to baiting him. It was just embarrassing. And when they found out that he had saved them from Inmenos Grande, the teasing got even worse. So when am I going to meet my 3rd daughter? His idiot father would ask. Where does this mystery girl live? I need to warn her about you. Karen would say jokingly. Would you like me to make you some food so you two could eat while you follow her? Yuzu would ask, not realizing that hearing her say that made him feel like a stalker. Still, he kept following her. And what was with that red-haired freak? When he saw them together, he wanted to beat the hell out of the guy but decided against it since it would probably bring more of them down upon him, making it even harder to do his so-called duty. He watched as the Shinigami walked around with a goofy smile on her face. He couldn't say much because he had one just as goofy. He had decided that he was going to talk to her the next time she was alone. He was still waiting to see if that red-haired baboon was still around. He watched her for close to an hour, never taking his eyes off her unless there was a hollow around, in which case he would hurry off and kill it to get back as fast as possible. Watching her brought a calm to his violent world. He watched her stop and take a knee next to the soul of a young girl that he knew. He brought her flowers almost every day and they would sit and chit-chat for a few minutes before he would head home. He wished he had known her when she was alive. She had lived such a sad life and he knows he could have brought some happiness to it. When the Shinigami brought her hand to her Zanpakuto, he immediately knew what she was about to do. He hurried out of the bushes and came out close to 30 feet behind her. Stop, he shouted. Rukia bent down next to the young girl. The young girl just looked up into her face and smiled. Rukia couldn't help but smile back. She was in a great mood. Hi, the little girl said. Well, hello, you're not afraid of me? Rukia asked, semi-puzzled. Most spirits were afraid of Shinigamis, thinking that they were going to send them to hell. The little shook her head, still smiling. No, should I be? The other guy told me I didn't need to be afraid anymore and that he was here to protect me until I was ready to go to heaven. Other guy, you mean another Shinigami? Was he dressed me? Did he tell you his name? Rukia asked with an excited smile. The little girl just smiled and nodded her head. He is really nice. He brings me flowers every day and talks to me. He told me that he would help me find peace so I could go to heaven on my own. He has a sword too, like you do, only his is really big. I can't even lift it, it's so heavy. He is really handsome too. He is brave and he has saved me from several monsters that try to chase me. Rukia just listened as the girl prattled on and on. She couldn't help but smile. He was nice to this little girl just like he was to apparently all the souls he saved. Why hadn't he done a soul burial on the girl? Well, she was sure he had his reasons. But trying to help a soul find their own peace was futile since most souls didn't know what had kept them here in the first place. And he even brings me toys. You want to see? The little girl points to a couple toys hidden behind a bush. Can I hold your sword? He lets me try all the time. He always laughs when I can't lift it, but I try anyway. Rukia gives a slight chuckle and nods her head. This is an interesting girl. She must be very lonely. No wonder why he stops to talk to her all the time. She is definitely very sweet. Rukia reaches to draw out her Zanpakuto to hand it to the girl when she hears the bushes behind her start to move. Before she can turn around, she hears, "Stop." She keeps her hand on her sword and slowly turns around and freezes. They're no more than 30 feet away as her masked hero. He is striking in his form-fitting robes and she can see the hilt of his massive Zanpakuto sticking up over his right shoulder. His face is still in the mask, but she can see his beautiful amber eyes. They are burning with what seems to be anger. Anger at her. Why? Stop. Don't send her. She isn't ready to go yet. He says in a loud voice. She can sense the fury. Ichigo. The young girl cries and runs to him.